Alright, hello again everybody. Today I'm going to show you how to make chocolate mousse. It is one of my favorite recipes. It is technically a French recipe. I don't really think that this particular recipe is because I found it on Google and it's literally like a 5-minute long chocolate mousse recipe. This is my favorite recipe that we make in 8th grade culinary, so I am going to make it for you today. The very first thing that we're going to do with this recipe is measure out our dry ingredients. We are going to put them in a smaller bowl so that way we can sift them. You need 1/2 cup of powdered sugar. I am using a dry measuring cup in order to measure this because this is very similar to the consistency of flour. The other thing that you're going to need is something to level off the powdered sugar. Now with this particular recipe, you don't have to be super exact because some people like their chocolate mousse a little bit thinner and some people like it really thick. I'll show you what those two different things look like. I always start with 1/2 cup of powdered sugar, but I usually end up adding both more powdered sugar and cocoa powder because I like it really chocolatey and I like it to have a really firm texture. So in order to measure your powdered sugar, you are going to make sure that your cup is completely full. And then you're going to do the same thing that you would ordinarily do with flour, where you tap it off a little bit, and then you gently slide off the excess powdered sugar. Try not to make a mess, I just did, but you know, you win some, you lose some. You're gonna put that in your smaller mixing bowl. I'm gonna set this aside. I'm not going to throw it in the sink to be washed just yet because I usually end up liking to add more. So then you're gonna put your powdered sugar to the side, and you are going to add your 1/4 cup of cocoa powder, using the Hershey kind. Now, once you get your cocoa powder open, because usually that takes a while, at least for me it does, because apparently I don't know how to open things, you're going to do the exact same thing. If you want an exact measurement, you're going to tap it off a little bit and then level off the excess. Then you're going to level off the excess, and you're going to dump it into your smaller bowl with dry ingredients. Those are your only 2 dry ingredients, which make this recipe really easy. The other ingredients that you need are heavy whipping cream, vanilla extract, and that's it. That's why it's so easy. Next, what you're going to do is sift these dry ingredients together so that way they're evenly blended. So that way when you end up adding them to the heavy whipping cream, you're not gonna get giant chunks of cocoa powder and you're also not gonna get giant chunks of powdered sugar. And then after you sift it, this is what it should look like. Hopefully you can see that. And then you're gonna put that off to the side, along with everything else. Next, you are going to measure out 1.5 cups of heavy whipping cream. This is heavy whipping cream. I'm using a liquid measuring cup because this is a liquid ingredient. Therefore, you need to use a liquid measuring cup. In order to measure out 1.5 cups, you're going to need to get down on eye level, just like we've talked about in the past. All right, so now I'm gonna go ahead and get down on eye level. And I'm gonna pour 1.5 cups of heavy whipping cream in here. And then I'm gonna stick this back in the fridge because of food safety. Now that we have 1.5 cups of heavy whipping cream, we are going to mix it until we get soft peaks. Ideally, if you have a glass bowl that you can stick in the freezer for a little bit before you do this step, that does make it a lot easier and it makes it so it mixes a little bit faster and becomes more like the consistency of like Cool Whip. However, I don't have that. I have a metal bowl, which is fine. It doesn't hold on to the temperature the same way that glass bowl would. So I'm just gonna do the best that I can. So the very first thing I'm going to do is pour in all of my heavy whipping cream. And then I'll set that aside to be washed. Now I have my hand mixer. I just plugged it in. I made sure that it was off before I plugged it in. And I am going to go ahead and whisk the heavy whipping cream. Start on level 1. Otherwise, it's probably going to fly everywhere. And then as the whipping cream becomes a little bit thicker, then you can go ahead and move up your speed. right, so now my heavy whipping cream has been whipped enough where you can see soft peaks. I'm gonna show you what that looks like a little bit closer. So when you're talking about stiff peaks, I'm saying that you should be able to mix it, and then when you pull your fork or your mixer straight up, see how there's a little bit of a peak right there? That's what I'm looking for. This, I could even mix a little bit more if I wanted to make them a little bit stiffer, but it's good for now, so I'm gonna go ahead and add my other dry ingredients. All right, so now that I have soft peaks, I'm going to go ahead and add in my other ingredients. My last wet ingredient and the last ingredient overall is going to be 1/4 of a teaspoon of vanilla extract. I like a little bit more vanilla extract, so typically what I do is I take my vanilla extract, I pour it straight into the cap, and then I use that as my measurement. If you want it a little less sweet, then you can use other measurements, but this is the way that I like to do it. This is the way that I like to do it, so I just added a lot of vanilla, so that's fine. I typically like a lot of vanilla, so yeah, I'm gonna wash my hands. All right, so this is a learning moment because that was weird. So now you know that 1, you should always measure something over the bowl so that way it doesn't go everywhere. And 2, using the cap can sometimes be difficult because of the way that it's shaped, and it's more likely that you're going to spill excess. I like a lot of extra vanilla in my chocolate mousse, so it's not the end of the world for me. If you wanted to make it differently, you absolutely could. But now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and mix this in, and then after I finish mixing in the vanilla, I'm gonna add in my other dry ingredients. All right, I've now added in my vanilla, so I'm going to add in my dry ingredients. I'm going to take my bowl and I'm going to add it in thirds. So I'm just gonna add a little bit of this dry ingredient mixture. But notice how there's still some left in here. See? The reason that you do that is that way it doesn't go everywhere. Once you start mixing, it agitates the food, as it should, because that's how you mix. If you add all of your cocoa powder and powdered sugar at once, then it's gonna fly everywhere and you're gonna lose a lot of that flavor and you're gonna make a big mess. So what we're gonna do is add it in small amounts. I'm gonna go ahead and mix this, and then I will show you what it looks like after I add it in thirds. One other thing that I thought about is that when you start to mix in your dry ingredients, you should absolutely start on level 1 of your hand mixer. If you start too fast, just like the heavy whipping cream, it's gonna fly absolutely everywhere. Once you start to see it get incorporated, then you can move up the speed on your mixer. All right, so I've added in the first third. I'm now gonna do the second third. And I'm gonna make sure that that's evenly incorporated before I add any more dry mixture. All right, as you can see, when I lift up my mixture, hopefully you can see that, it's starting to get really thick, which means that it's not runny. The reason that it starts to get thicker is because of the powdered sugar and the cocoa powder, because those are dry ingredients. It starts to make it a little bit more moussey and a little bit thicker. I personally really like it thick. I'm gonna add my last third, and then I'm gonna revisit to see if I need to add any more cocoa powder or anything like that. If I add more, I typically eyeball it. If you wanted to measure it, you absolutely could. All right, I am gonna go ahead and add in a little bit more powdered sugar and just a tiny bit more cocoa powder. I'm just gonna use a spoon for the cocoa powder, so go ahead and just bear with me for a second. I'm gonna eyeball this. Again, if you wanna measure it, you can, but I just like it the way that I like it. And you can absolutely taste this as you go. That's probably a good idea as opposed to what I'm doing is just hoping for the best. But always feel free to taste it as you go. All right, now I have finished mixing everything. What you want to look for are stiff peaks in your chocolate mousse. I'm going to zoom you in just a second, but essentially a stiff peak is when you take out your mixer and the little mountain stays exactly where it is. There's no curl over, nothing like that. If you want it a little bit thinner, then you can add less powdered sugar. If you want it a little bit thicker, like I said, you can add some more, as I've probably reiterated way too many times. It also, you get stiffer peaks and it gets thicker if you mix it in a cold bowl, like I talked about at the beginning of this video. I don't have a cold bowl, it's fine. The heavy whipping cream was in the fridge, so it's not like it's going to mess with like the food safety aspect of it, but it does make it a lot easier if you make it and you refrigerate it right after instead of eating it right after, or if you use a frozen bowl in order to mix that. So I'm gonna zoom you in really quick. All right, so this is what I'm talking about when I say stiff peaks. I have my mixer in here. I lift it straight up and those little mountains are staying exactly the way that I left them when I lifted the mixer out. So that's the consistency we're looking for. Sometimes you may see air bubbles in there, that's totally fine as well. So this is my chocolate mousse. It's a nice, easy recipe. I love this one. This is what I make for like every family dinner and whatnot. And you really don't need that many ingredients. So it is really easy to make. It takes maybe 5 or 10 minutes, depending on how you want to church it up, and add different things to it and make it more elaborate. But at base, it's a 5-minute recipe, which makes it super easy. So I'm gonna go ahead and probably eat this. If you have any questions, let me know. The recipe for this is also posted on Google Classroom in conjunction with this video. So you can use the exact recipe if you want to. Thank you for watching. I finally learned how to use my phone, so now you can actually see what I'm talking about. I will see you guys soon. Thanks.